Why do you seek to restrain me? An illusion could never contain me. These scarcity thoughts, with their firewalls and oppressive limits, are falling away.
All right. Here we are on January 3rd, 2018 with Eastcoastmom Westcoastson
and international uncle, Brad Johnson.
International uncle. Brad Johnson from New Earth Teachings, formerly Reality Whisperer, for anybody that's been following him for a while. Hi, Brad.
Hey guys, how's it going?
We gotta act like we just connected. Oh, hello, good to see you here.
That's basically how it works, yeah.
Well, I've been following Brad since 2011, and he's been instrumental in my expansion. And I really wanted to, at Eastcoastmom Westcoastson, the purpose is for us to show and share as many perspectives as possible, because that's how we break outside of that box, is by entertaining other perspectives. But I also wanted to share my mentors. So every month we've been having somebody that's been a mentor to us, somebody that we follow, somebody that we really found their authenticity and really living their teachings and putting themselves out there. And Brad Johnson is one of those people. So thank you, Brad, so much for your contribution. And I'm sure my family will say thank you, because my life has just been magical and wonderful ever since I been following this, getting my life together for, since 2011 and getting to the place where I am today, this magical 2018.
Oh, great. Well, again, thank you very much for that. For me, it's just an authenticity journey. I've started this back in 2008, and I just wanted to, start to write a novel, right? And starting to write a novel, I was being able to understand more about the ET presence, about extraterrestrials. And I wanted to do a lot of really deep research in regards to what was really going on. And then it just led me into meditation. And from there, from meditation, I just went on to progress myself, energy healing, channeling, everything like that. And I'm just a doer, right? I look into certain things and I start doing them. And so I just went into creating an online community, talked to other channelers and other psychics to find out exactly what they did. So it's kind of like I was interviewing and reporting a lot about what people were doing. And then I just kind of amalgamated a lot of that knowledge into myself and decided this is something that I'm going to do. And I'm no longer going to be an investigator of it. I'm going to start doing it. So I started doing it. I started doing automatic writing. I started doing channeling. And I started communicating with a lot of other different beings from different dimensions, different realities. And then there was another person who has basically had about 8 years experience as a channeler. And he came to me one night and he just said, "Oh, Brad, you have very strong connections with Sirius, with the star of Sirius, Sirius A, the dog star. And so it feels like there's an energy there that wants to talk to you." And so I went ahead and did my routine that I did. And that is when I connected with the being that I channel, known as Adronis. And from there, he basically stated, "I'm a future version of you 297 years in the future. I've come back at this time to assist with your own spiritual evolution." And basically the nature of our relationship is that as you start to spiritually evolve, others will start to evolve with you, and you're all going along for a ride. Mm-hmm. And so is this something you want to do? And so I agreed, yes, this is something that I'll definitely pursue. And I started talking to him. And again, I just started with channeled writing at first, and then I graduated more into vocal channeling. So I did talk to Daryl Anka, who channels Bashar, just through emails and stuff like that, just asking him exactly how he channeled. There's even an interview with Daryl and I up on my YouTube channel as well. I just talked to him during a news or a radio show, and he was just giving some really good detail as it related to channeling, because I still wasn't too sure if I was actually channeling in that way. Had some friends say, "I don't know, Brad, I don't know if you're channeling. It just sounds still too much like you in that way." So, well, what does that matter, right? It's the aspect of the information. So I went to him and started talking to him. He said he basically got an idea about how I was channeling. And yeah, just keep doing it. And so he just gave some good advice to me and helped me out in that way. I wouldn't consider him like my teacher or anything like that, but just someone who was lending me a helping hand. But after that, I just started getting more and more deeply into the channeling. I wanted to go and explore everything. I wanted to explore the entire spectrum. So my first 9 years of this entire thing has been all about seeking and being able to integrate and incorporate a lot of these understandings And now it's more so getting into just being able to integrate and to maybe help with mentoring, and just being able to make this the living, make this your becoming in that state, going into a state of beingness. So that's where I am right now, is just going into a state of beingness and just applying all these techniques that have taken years to develop.
Okay, and so let's talk about some of those techniques. You went from being an author to meditation. Is that how that started?
Yeah, I mean, before I started all of this, I was like into internet marketing. I was working on video games as well too. And I wanted to work on this book. And so this book was called Day Zero. And I eventually made it a couple years later, around that time of 2008 to around 2011, I think it was. And it was like a space fantasy, a science fiction in that way. A lot about this human girl that is leaving Earth and lives on a planet of extraterrestrials, then comes back and helps humanity in that way.
That's the movie you're making now, right?
Yeah, it's called The Inbound. No,
Okay,
it's not called Day Zero anymore, but that's part of the movie that I made, the independent movie, or short film. That's basically what it is. It should be ready here very soon. And I'm also working on a web series based upon The Inbound as well too. So that's in the works, but I can't say too much. It's still kind of hush hush. But yeah, that's happening right now. But that's also happening in the middle that I'm doing a lot of my sessions and a lot of my work. I'm going to be moving here very soon, the next couple of weeks as well too, setting up a new base camp. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that's coming down the pipe right now.
Right. Well, the reason why I'm asking specifically about meditation and what your journey was for those first 9 years is because a lot of awakening is happening. Obviously, we see it everywhere, and I see it with my son. I see it with his friends, and they are at this place where they're reaching out and, like we were, grabbing things, but they're running into some problems with different techniques that really work. And so is there a technique how did you find yourself to get so deep into meditation where you were actually able to channel so quickly?
I looked into everybody else's and I just kind of amalgamated it into my own.
Okay.
So I don't just rely on one particular source back then. Back then I was looking into many different people. I said, okay, well, this person channels this way, that person channels this way. This is what this person is doing. And I basically just kind of sampled it. It's kind of like you're in a grocery store and you're tasting these samples, right? And you're not just relying on one source. I feel that if you basically get your information from one source, it's going to be very stale, right? You want to make sure that you are broadening your horizons. You're making sure that you're learning from a lot of people, right? But you're also learning from the greatest teacher, and that's yourself, right? And the greatest way to learn from yourself is to look at your shadows, is to look into your own darkness. All knowledge comes from darkness. That's primarily how it works. It's raw knowledge. It's undisciplined. It's untapped. It's basically just like turning on the faucet and here's the raw water, right? So primarily that's what we're doing, is we're taking all of this knowledge, because knowledge in that sense, in the greatest way of respect, is pretty much useless. It's basically when we take all of that knowledge and transform it into something that works for us, that it becomes something valuable, and that turns into light, right? So knowledge is abundant everywhere you look. It doesn't matter what it is, doesn't matter who gave it to you or anything like that. People just really, really value knowledge. And so that's not really the part that's important. It's applying what you feel you know and seeing if it actually works with you and feeling if it moved you into another level of being. And if that does that, then you're starting to understand yourself, right? The whole idea is for you to become your own master, to become your own guru, to become your own teacher. And again, people are here and they're giving you certain forms of perspectives. But again, it's kind of like you're the filter. You have to basically create the bandwidth of all the information that you're getting and downloading all that information, and that's great. But if you're not applying the information, then again, it's useless, right? Okay. So this is why knowledge is good, is a good thing to have, but it's kind of like having, the TNT for dynamite, right? Just being able to get all the stuff that you need to light the fuse and then create an explosion. And that's all that knowledge is. It's just, it's the stuff that's going to ignite the dynamite and cause the explosion. But you're the one that's basically propelling yourself into that next dimension of wisdom and awareness.
So let's talk about, so you started the meditation and the channeling, and you're accumulating all this information and creating it into your own technique. You also are starting to do shadow work and starting to do the deep dive, because that's really what, you can't do the application without doing the dive, like you said, dealing with your shadows, basically. Mm-hmm. How did that process work for you? what were there any specific books or teachings or things that were really moving you at the time?
Books, no. Teachings, not really.
Okay.
My own life, yes. It was primarily just looking into what it is that I felt I wanted to become in that way. And so, like I said, I talked to other people, and there was other people that were sharing information, and that's great. But I don't really cling on to one particular person's method in that way. I look at certain methods similar to my own and say, okay, that's great. I think that'll work really good for a person. Or if it's something I haven't heard before, and say, okay, it's interesting. And I'll kind of meld it into my own thing. But no, I haven't really been caught up too much with books. I mean, there's a few books I've read over the years, but I wouldn't say that they're responsible for a great transformation taking place. It really just comes down to the simple teaching of surrender, right? Being able to feel, well, who am I? You know, what is it that I want? And that, again, becomes a rhetorical question.
How did you get to that question? When did you have that moment? See, that's the issue, is that we have to have that moment.
Yeah.
When did that moment come for you?
You basically come down to the point where it's almost like all darkness around your entire self, right? I left a marriage. I was on my own. I wasn't too sure about what to do with this ability in that way. And it just is at a point of almost like a breakdown, right? It's kind of like what a lot of the ancient masters had to do. They had to break themselves down and they had to build themselves back up. And that's primarily what you got to do, right? It's not just that you're going to be born into the light. The light in that sense doesn't hold any knowledge. The knowledge in that sense comes from the darkness. And then basically when you go into the aspect of light, that becomes wisdom, right? That's all part of what you have done to become wise. And wisdom is created through your journeying of experience, right? So this is primarily what I had to do. I was in a one-bedroom apartment. I wasn't able to see my kids for quite some time. I was, again, out of a divorce, not a divorce, but a separation at the time. And I was just not too sure about what to do. And so I just started to rely upon everything that I was learning when I first began. And so I went into meditation. I talked to Adronis. I did some channeling. And it helped me to encourage myself to go deeper within myself. If there was a teacher, it was Adronis, right? And again, that's just a version of myself. And so he was encouraging me to go deeply into myself and looking into emotions and looking into traumas and all that. And I wasn't even realizing too much about the traumas until not too long ago. And it's really when you're able to go deeply into the exploration of yourself and you start looking into what you've been holding on to that you know does not work for you, that's basically you learning from your shadows. Your shadows are your greatest teacher, right? So there will just come a point where you say, oh, I just don't know what to do with my life anymore. I don't know what I'm doing here. Here I am working a 9-to-5 job. I don't like it. Here I am, running around with a partner that I'm not caring for too much anymore. I don't like it. And there'll just come that point, you can't schedule this, right? You cannot really teach this. This is something that needs to happen on its own natural course. And then when it does happen, then I get a lot of people saying, Brad, I just feel like I'm alone. I feel lonely. I don't really like my job anymore. And the first thing I like to say to them is congratulations, right? Because that's helping you to move into a new fold, a new way of life, a new dimension. And you have to look into the idea about how all these hardships are your teacher, and that we look at the darkness and we don't want to look at it. We feel it's awful, it's horrible. But again, that it's doing you the greatest favor because it's showing you everything that you're not. And when you fully realize that, now it is very, very simple to come into your natural authenticity because it's just looking into everything that you know you're not.
I would say that your journey and watching your journey, I actually bought a channeling course. It's so coincidental. You just released your channeling course yesterday, this new baby of yours that you've been working on. Mm-hmm. And I'm really excited to see what's in there. But years ago, I bought a channeling course from you. And that is, was very interested in channeling, and I obviously was looking for information, but all the teachings that I had experienced through my life were based in fear when it came to channeling. And what you had said through that channeling course was that only a vibration that will match yours is what you can bring in. And that is when I really discovered vibration. And I went into meditation because I had this fear of this crazy thing. I saw The Exorcist, the movie, when I was really young. So I would always have like this crazy, I would think that I would see like that girl every now and then, like late at night when it's dark, and she would always say my name, Charlotte, Charlotte. So in meditation, I saw this girl, and I needed to figure out what this shadow was, what this energy was. And so I went and gave this demon a hug. And it turned into me.
That's it.
It turned into me. And so just by reaching out and finding these pieces and taking this information and applying it and playing with it and really being courageous has helped me to get to this place. But I wanted to say thank you so much for that course, for these courses that you do offer, because that was a very, very deeply embedded fear that I didn't understand vibration, I didn't understand frequency, and that opened up something really huge for me at that moment. So, Kevin, did you have anything that you wanted to ask about any of those topics?
No, there was a question I was going to ask, and he answered it during that. So,
what was it?
Just along the lines of, well, I guess I could further the question. Do you think that we have to reach that point before we can reach out and accept trying these things that seem to be abstract in the moments, or, you know, for people who are really aren't familiar with it at all, and then they come across it? Do you think that we have to reach those moments, or?
It's a level of degree, and that's the important part, right? There could be a person who may have been, retired from the military, and they know that they had a very, very traumatic experience that took place, and they realize that they are having these, post-traumatic stress disorders in that sense, and they realize that that kind of depth of horror basically transformed them around, right? Where it could be another person who is a businessman in that sense and realizes that money is not the answer, and now they're able to switch themselves around. So it really all just comes together through varying degrees, right? So that's primarily the idea, is that, yeah, we're all going to go through our own shadows. We're all going to go through our own levels as it pertains to working with those shadow teachers in that way. So again, everybody will have it in their own way, but for them, it's like a breakdown. We could look at it and say, oh, that wasn't much of a breakdown. I did it worse than this, right? And it's not about comparison. It's just that was the aspect of their shadow reaching out to them, realizing this is not how to live anymore. This is not how I'm going to continue to live my life. I want to become who I'm naturally here to be. And discomfort, again, and shadow has been great teachers. They're all about telling you that when you're uncomfortable, then you're being able to look at it. It's helping you to make you look at that, right? If you're just going to say, oh, don't worry about it, don't worry about it, you just keep shrugging it off, it's just going to build up more and more and more and more. There are some people that are so highly in tune with themselves that when something like that happens, perhaps even on a delicate level, they're able to change themselves around. But again, that's all just a matter of degree. So it all really just comes down to the levels of what a person feels personally they had to go through for their shadows to be realized as a teacher.
Certainly.
Okay, certainly. Okay, so back to the frequency and vibration, because today I released a teaser video, one of the videos you did on how the universe understands you. And this was something I tried so hard to share in some of my groups and things that I was doing through the addiction community, is that the universe doesn't understand negation. The energy is energy, and it doesn't understand the yes or the no. And so can you explain more about that? I think that's a big thing, is us understanding it's so multidimensional, and there's so much going on. And there's so many different perspectives that change how we view things the more we expand.
Right. Well, there was actually a quote that I put up on my Facebook just last night before going to bed. And that quote was, whatever one lacks and holds in contempt will be their lesson throughout life. Only until the scorn is realized and harmonized shall your shadow become light through the alchemy of self-transformation. Right. So basically what that is saying is that whatever you feel that you are in lack of is going to be your reality. Right. That's going to be your determining factor. And this is what we have been bred to think in that way. I say, oh my God, I'm no good at this. I can't do this. I'm going to be a failure at this job. I can't make this money. I can't. Lack, 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 lack. And the universe says, okay, here's lack. That's all this person is putting out. They're constantly asking for lack, so I'm going to give it to them, right? That's how it works. And basically, we have just been trained so well at birth, moving on to childhood years, of feeling that, I can't do this, or I shouldn't be doing this. And we get so caught up in the idea of celebrities and royalty figures and government officials and police and whatever it is, teachers, and we give them so much of the credit because they feel where they've been, right? When a person just come up to me and say, Brad, thank you so much for this, I would say, thank you so much for you being able to listen to yourself, to move yourself into that direction, because it wasn't really me that changed you. It was yourself. You guided yourself into this particular type of material that brought you into this great transformation, because you're showing yourself of a worthiness, a greatness within yourself that is now coming about. But primarily, that's how the universe works. It works with two ways: focus and lack thereof, right? So if there is a lack of focus where you're no longer belittling yourself anymore, and the focus is now working together on your strengths and your empowerment, then there are going to be those things that reflect back to you. It's a living mirror, right? So the whole idea here is being able to work together with the traumas, working with the turmoils within yourself that felt you saying, I can't do this, or I can't become this person. And as long as I can't do this and can't become this person, I'm going to continue to attract more of these traumas that are embedded within me. It's all about traumas, right? And we can look into the average psychologist and saying, well, you know, we just have to forgive that person and forgive this person in that sense. You don't have to forgive anybody. You know, it's not about that other person. That person is a catalyst, and they're coming forward as a reflection based upon the trauma of magnetism that you're holding onto yourself, right? So that trauma of saying that I'm no good, or I'm not worthy, or I feel rejected, I feel abandoned, then I'm going to start bringing people in there that reflect that reflection of abandonment, or that reflection of rejection, right? And that's going to be my entire reality, because I'm validating it, right? So whatever you validate and you give focus upon is going to determine your reality, right? What you focus determines your reality. So the old George Lucas line, right? But that's primarily how it works, is that if you really work upon yourself, you bring love and compassion and forgiveness, you compliment yourself each and every single day, rewire your entire daily routine so that you're complimenting who you are and you're loving what you're doing. If your favorite thing is going out for a jog in the morning, enjoying fresh air, doing some yoga, baking some cookies, whatever it is, right? Do all those things as much as possible, because that's bringing you into a very heightened love level, and your love will change. You'll start to evolve. It'll come into new facets of transformation, but just stick with what you have right now, simple acts of kindness. And as you do that, your love levels go up so high, you're now able to look at that trauma and it doesn't even impact you anymore, right? You're looking at that and saying, I remember back when I was 5 years old and I stubbed my toe and I was swearing at everybody and everybody thought I was possessed by the devil and whatever it was, right? But now you're able to look at that 5-year-old version of yourself and embrace it, right? Love that version of yourself, because now you no longer see that person as an injury. You're seeing that version of a person that is now able to be unified. You're forgiving and loving that person. That person, that aspect of you is no longer being hurt. It's being loved. It's being embraced. And that's what brings about the state of forgiveness. So now when you look at that situation in the past, you're saying, yeah, I resolved that. And it feels great right now. And I see myself as that new person, right? That's primarily how the transformation works.
Right. And I would say that once you start really doing this transformation and expanding, one of the best things that happens, it did for me, and then some of the people that I've spoken to, is we start to see these beautiful synchronicities in life. And once I started seeing them, I started really paying attention to the universe. This is where I realized that if I said I don't have enough money for something, that's what the universe was hearing, my lack. And you're right. We have been raised with the idea of scarcity, the not enough, not good enough, me not being good enough, right? Not enough of anything. We don't have enough of anything, not enoughness, the disease of not enoughness. And back to trauma. I remember seeing a post on your Facebook page about your notebook. What I forget what it was called, and I tried to find it.
Yeah, it's the Inner Workbook.
The Inner Workbook. And
yeah, just a simple little notebook that you pick up on a dollar store. And that's primarily where I do a lot of my inner work, is just looking into people who have basically hurt you, people who have created conflicts within your life. And you're able to just go back into that memory, write it out as best as you can, and saying, what happened in this situation? How did it make me feel? What type of trauma did I experience, right? I felt abandonment from my dad, or I felt rejection from my mother, for example. And then basically you just write all that out and you put it aside, right? And then as you put it aside, you're just starting to do your inner work again. You're starting to bring love energy into yourself. You come back when you feel that there's an impulse to go back to that entry. You open it up and saying, okay, this is exactly why it happened in that way, because I'm looking into myself. And so again, we want to throw blame at people. We want to say, well, my dad was a jackass and he did this and he was a horrible person. He was abusive in that sense, and saying, well, how did I attract that kind of abuse into my life, right? oh, I was 3 years old and I was doing this in that sense. Yeah. And of course, this is the thing, is that we come to this planet lifetime after lifetime, and we stock up on a lot of karmic debris in that way. And as a 3-year-old, you really can't avoid that. That's going to lead to certain levels of abuse. But again, now that you're an adult, you have developed your discernment and you're experiencing that memory now. You're not 3 years old anymore, right? You're a 25, 30-year-old person. And so now you're looking into that and realizing that, yes, that was a harsh situation when I was 3 years old, but here I am looking at the memory right now. Do I still see myself as that 3-year-old, or have I grown? Have I developed myself a lot more from that experience? And realizing what has it done for me by throwing blame at another particular person. It's only caused me more anger. It's only caused me more rage. It's affected my health. And so you're not looking at that situation when you were 3. You're looking at that situation now. That's your memory now, right? So now you're taking all of this great aspect of discernment that you've developed over the years, and now you're being able to bring your love levels up to higher degrees, and now you're forgiving that aspect of a 3-year-old, and you're saying, you know what, that's how it happened. And I can understand exactly why my father was like that. He was overwhelmed. He was not ready to be a parent. He felt that he was completely discouraged by his own family, and he passed that on. And I can understand that that's not something that, you want to pass on to your children, but nonetheless, that's what's happened. The whole key here is being able to accept the situation as happened, right? And being able to turn over a new leaf, being able to move into higher ground, right? So that's primarily the idea here, is looking into the idea of these memories as they happen now. You're not going back 20 plus years ago into that 3-year-old. You're looking back at the memory and saying, what can I do to harmonize that memory, turn over a new leaf, and bring forgiveness to myself, which therefore remedies the entire situation.
And then as you establish more and more expansion, you get to a point where the perspective changes, and you realize that we all come here for that experience, and you've chosen to come here for that experience, and there really is no forgiveness at the end of the day, because we are all source. And so for somebody, the gift that somebody has given you by giving you that experience. So to find the gift.
In a way, but don't neglect forgiveness, right? That's one of your grandest tools.
I'm saying as after. This is that's the second or third step. This is like the 10th step. That's the expansion part.
Yeah, really, when I hear people saying, well, Brad, we know we're all one, we're all source. I mean, that's true. Have you felt it? Have you always 24/7 been in source? Well, no, not real well, exactly, right? And that's really not important right now. What's important right now is that you're feeling yourself in regards to these situations, because people will use the aspect of oneness and connecting to source as a cop-out to themselves, right? They'll use it as a veil. And they'll say, I'm just one with everything and I'm not going to bother with this. Well, that's an aspect of fear, right? And the whole idea is that you want to be very grounded with who you are right now. Yes, we're all divine loving beings. We're all infinite creators. We all come from the one source. We are all one. We're all here. We're all now. But it's also important that you are looking into your human affairs, because what is it what we're here to do? Bring heaven onto earth, right? And in order to bring heaven onto earth, we need to look at ourselves as a human being and seeing what our human side is attempting to do to help align ourselves to become part of heaven, right? So this is where I say, you really understand source and oneness when you're at that point of complete stillness. It's not just about talking about it, right? This is where I say that knowledge is pretty much useless. It's being able to know that you're applying this into yourself, and you've created that experience and realized, I went through all this turmoil and now I feel interconnected with everything. And that's where I am right now. That's great. Now that's basically saying, yes, I can now say I'm truly one with everything. But a person who's basically struggling, who's still frustrated and saying, oh, you know what, I'm just all one and that's all I'm going to do about it, then that becomes a cop-out. That becomes a frustration and fear, right? For
sure. It's definitely, I think for me, for the trauma, I did a lot of meditation, and I used some of Bashar's material to do meditations. I did what was the shamanic soul retrieval work, where I would, without the assistance of a shaman, I would go into meditation and then go back to that whatever trauma had happened, and I would change it. Or I would go to my child self and say, look, we're okay. We're safe. We're okay now, and integrate that part of myself.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
So those were the earlier steps in healing. And this is what I mean, and I'm sure what Brad means too, by taking all these different pieces, because those pieces came from a whole bunch of different places, and then I put them into a meditation. And then that was just one phase of healing, though, because that healing I thought was enough, but that spiral came right back again. And then there were more layers of the onion that had to come
there will
off.
be. And that will happen as well too, is you'll start doing this is why it's good to keep track of what you're doing, is to write it down, right? And look into these situations to where trauma has happened, because it can even be very small amounts of trauma. It could just be something about you 12 years old in a schoolyard talking to a bully or being picked on by a bully in that way, and you thought that was a very small event. But there are situations that were coming into your life right now that represent a perfect reflection of that old situation. So, well, I hardly give that any thought. And now it just came to me in that way. That's exactly what happened. I've had that quite a few times. And I just thought it was like a really, really big thing with my parents, or a really big thing with the sibling in that sense. But no, it was something else very, very small. And I just started looking into that and say, oh my God, this reminds me of what happened when I was a kid. And now I'm able to look into that and forgive it in that way. Another thing that I do as well too is dream interpretation as well too, and being able to look into your dream landscape. And this is a very, very powerful tool. And basically, when I was just starting to get back into the swing of things in the new year, I was noticing that my responsibility level was pretty low, right? I was like, oh, just still chilling out for the holidays. I was out in nature. I was just feeling relaxed and unwinded. And I wasn't getting back into that happy grind. Relating to my work. And so my dreams were telling me that. So, Brad, you're just not really kind of in that responsible level yet. You're still kind of coasting in your holidays still. So you got to try and work with yourself and bring yourself back out. And I thank my dreams for sharing that with me, right? When you really know how to interpret your dreams, it's an incredible tool, right? It's something that's really, really amazing. And it tells you everything about yourself. The challenging things about dream is being able to understand the symbolisms and sequences that come together, right? So we can imagine that we're in a big mansion, and we can imagine that we're hearing voices around us in that sense and saying, okay, well, a mansion, that must represent big fortune in that sense, and saying, well, no, it means that you think very highly of yourself primarily, and they have many of these rooms and all this stuff with all of these great forms of treasures in that way. But there's treasures that even can't be found through your own accord as you're aligned right now. You can try walking up the stairs, but now the stairs turns into a paradox. And now it won't let you up the stairs because you still don't feel that you're worthy of looking into the upper levels of yourself, going into the inner self of your being. You're still too confined with the idea of the external world, right? So this is, again, the challenge of dreams, is being able to understand not only the symbolisms, but the sequences of those symbolisms that relate to you and what you're going through right now.
Okay, so let's go with frequency and these things that we're talking about with trauma. And let's talk about ayahuasca. It's a big thing right now. And oh my God, I must get 5 or 6 posts a day from different people that are really pushing ayahuasca, which I believe that it's a great tool. It's a great tool, but these people are like cooking it up every weekend, getting people together and doing these trips every couple of days. I'm going to journey. And I think this is kind of what you were talking on when we talked about the all one and kind of scapegoating.
Yeah,
so let's talk a little bit. And how does it, you're the first person that I've heard say it impairs your energy body in some way.
It does, yeah. Primarily all psychedelics do that, right? Primarily is that we have our own natural functions as it relates to our body in regards to how we perceive reality. When we start going into these heavy psychedelics, be it DMT, be it psilocybin, I've done psilocybin a couple times as well myself, and when it comes to the aspect of ayahuasca, is that this is a very potent, intense psychedelic. And primarily what it does is it needs to take energy from yourself for you to perceive the visions that you're getting, right? So continual usage of something like ayahuasca or DMT or psilocybin in that way, MDMA, all of these can be good up into a certain level of moderation, right? If you feel that you're really being guided to do it, then go ahead and give it a try, right? But if you're constantly doing it all the time, you're basically shortening your lifespan. Primarily is what's happening, is it just basically gulps up your jing. It gulps up your prenatal chi, right? Once your prenatal chi is gone, you're toast. Primarily, your body just ceases to be, right? You perish. So basically, when there's a lot of these particular forms of psychedelics that happen and people get very, very addicted to them, this is why you feel that they don't look very healthy, right? They feel like they have lost a lot of energy. Even the shamans, even if you were to tell this to like I would say a medicine man in that way, he'd be like this, right? You do not screw around with these things, right? These are not toys. And people will use them, again, as an escape. They'll use it as a drug in that way. And they're not drugs, but again, when you're basically addicted to it, it could basically be seen in that way as a drug. So you have to be very, very careful with this. If you're feeling that you're doing a good fasting for yourself, and you're feeling your inner guidance saying, yes, go ahead and do some ayahuasca because there's something very valuable that needs to be told to you, great, go ahead and give it a try. But if you're just basically just cooking it up for the weekend and inviting a party of people over the ayahuasca, I'm not going to that party, right?
I mean,
You have to be very careful with that.
They're using it to journey for spiritual evolution, for expansion. I mean, they're on the push to try to, ayahuasca is going to show them what needs to be seen, yada, yada, yada. But I think that there's a certain amount of, I have never used LSD or any of these types of journey inducers, and but I go on some amazing journeys when I meditate. Now I can admit that I kind of get, and when I do readings and a little channeling, there's this buzz that I have achieved during, the best body buzz, that I've never used a drug that has ever made me feel as good as that makes me feel. So I can understand. So I can understand that. I don't know if ayahuasca makes you feel like that. Does it? I've
never done ayahuasca myself. I've done psilocybin, but in that way, psilocybin is a very unique one because it can basically make you experience any particular type of psychedelic once you take enough psilocybin, right? So if you take, like, say 4 or 5 grams of psilocybin, I only took like a 1 gram dose the first time I tried it, and then like a 1.5 gram dose the second time. But primarily when you start to get very potent with psilocybin, you can say, okay, be ayahuasca, and then you'll experience ayahuasca, or be MDMA, you'll be MDMA in that way, right? Psilocybin is very traversable with that particular way. But yeah, that's primarily true, is that you can actually get into a highly psychedelic effect just by breathing. That's it. It's deep breathing, right? You basically do similar to what Wim Hof has done with him being his Iceman. I've only discovered recently about what he's been doing because I did my own Tumo technique in the past. And I've seen what he's doing and say, yeah, this is it. You basically just keep breathing for like 5 or 10 minutes, and you keep pushing in and pushing out. And it's just, right, constantly. And people actually start getting hallucinogenic in that way, right? They basically would experience as if they were on DMT, if they're on ayahuasca, and all of that, right? All of that comes together very, very intensely, and you're basically just facing your traumas. You're facing your emotional states. You can actually start to see beings in the room. You can start to feel your connection to source just by breathing. And here's the good thing about that. That won't harm your life force. It's bringing yourself into like a high adrenaline rush. It's getting your adrenaline pumping. It's alkalining your body. It's getting the cells to cooperate. It's unifying everything because your body is filled with oxygen. If you guys really want a good rush, fill your body with oxygen. That's it. That's all you have to do. You don't even have to do a lot of these psychedelic trips. But like I said, if you're feeling guided to do it, then go for it. But again, I would really recommend doing that recommendation of just doing it very, very sparingly. Like even when I did psilocybin, I have no intention of doing it for a very long time, right? I've already gotten the message that I have. It was actually helping me to connect a lot more with nature. So I put my hand on a tree, and I can feel the heartbeat of nature just connecting in that way. It's something that psilocybin gave me as a gift, and I'm deeply in appreciation for that. But now you're going to notice that being able to do deep breathing, oxygenation of your body, going into a dark room for several days as well too, and having these hallucinations, I wouldn't say hallucinations, that's not the right word, but just being able to have these very deep spiritual experiences, right? Yeah, deep spiritual experiences about this. I wouldn't even say journey either. I would just say it's all about you altering your frequency and moving yourself into a new alignment of being, right? Journey in that sense, it can be true, but it's not about a destination in that way. It's not even about the idea of going from point A to point B. It's the idea of aligning yourself to the spectrum of frequency altogether, right?
I think I think that's what's tough about a lot of this stuff is there's these cultures built around all these things. Even even meditation, people who aren't familiar with it. And that's why I feel like people need to understand, especially the younger people, that you don't have to drink the Kool-Aid when it comes to certain, you don't have to dive all in, you know what I mean? Just take bits and pieces and build your own culture with all of these devices.
You got it, yeah. I mean, look at the 60s movement. That's where weed was at its highest aspect, right? It was the 60s movement. It was Woodstock. It was, the hippie movement in that way. And everybody was about, free love making and smoking pot, getting high and all that stuff, right? That was the craze. And of course, we're still seeing that nowadays with weed. And I've tried weed myself; it doesn't really do much for me. But I just say, you know, there's other methods that you're learning about that don't have to be into that state of extreme where you're actually costing life force into your body as well too. And again, like I said, if you're feeling guided, go for it. But if you're really looking into something that can really be a lot more quote unquote safer for your body, then again, oxygen replenishment and dark room meditations are great for that.
Do you have any more questions about that, Seven?
No. Yeah, I wanted to point that out for sure.
But again, like I said, a lot of people will use ayahuasca as a state of escape. That's primarily what it is. They will see, oh my God, look at the shamans in South America. They did all this, and look how wise they are. And say, hey, maybe I'll become wise like that if I start, you know, doing getting the ayahuasca vine and all that stuff. And again, it becomes a craze. It becomes a trend. You got to be very, very careful with trends. The trends themselves are mechanical. And so if you start getting into that and saying, well, all the other cool kids are doing that, then again, all you're doing is being a slave to a trend. You're not even thinking for yourself.
But I would, me and Seven have even talked about, you know, going to Peru and doing, you know.
Oh, that would be the place I'd recommend. Absolutely. Right. Go to the medicine man themselves. And again, it's maybe not shaman. They don't even like that word. But go to the medicine man themselves and say, this is why I want to come into the spiritual journey. This is why I want to have this experience, is because of this reason, right? And you may say you're feeling guided, and they'll even scan you. They'll look into your energy and they'll say, no, you don't need ayahuasca, right? Or they'll say, okay, yeah, this is something we can do, right? So they'll basically give you their own scan as well too, and determine if that's something for you. And even if it's not something for you, they'll do something to help you along the way, educating you in that way. So yeah, I mean, it's good to go to the masters and talk to them, because they know above all who requires it and who doesn't.
And we're really going back to that, because we've been on our way back to that place for some years. But let's talk about 2018. Let's talk about my perception. 2012, from my own experience, there's something happening with fractals and my timelines, and different things were happening. And I was having these experiences where I was driving, and then all of a sudden I would be driving in the opposite direction on the other side of the highway, and a couple hours had gone by. And so I was going into meditation and asking, what's happening here? Am I, you know, having strokes? Do I need to go to a doctor? You know? And what I was getting is that timelines were converging, that my fractals were coming together. And but 2018 marks something different. And this is a new journey of the soul from this point forward. And let's talk about that a little bit more. I felt that magical portal. Like, this has been a beautiful canvas that I've walked onto on 2018.
Right. Well, 2018, from what I've termed it, is the year of renewal, right? So primarily 2017 was the year of connection. And through the year of connection, we basically connected a lot more with shadows, right? We're basically pulling out these really nasty roots from the ground and realizing that we've been facing these roots for a very long time. Basically, between 2017 and 2024, Adronis has referred to this as a span of change. And within these next 8 years, or I would say basically 7 years now, is that we're going to be experiencing more intensity on this planet than we've ever had before, ever. And so there's going to be a lot of great shifts taking place. And again, you talk to a lot of people and saying, oh my God, I've been going emotionally crazy. I've been feeling like I've been getting these visions. I feel like my intuition is going off the hook, and I don't know what's going on. It's just so many people that are looking to ground themselves, and they don't know what's going on. They think it's stress. They think it's tension. They think it's something in regards maybe to some type of depression or whatever it may be. But it's really you opening yourself up. It's your body saying, no, it's time to discard these old roots. You know, you're doing internal gardening here, and you're pulling all these things out. So yeah, I mean, basically since December of 2012, we've had a benchmark time. And that's basically the beginning of the fractal itself, as you say, or basically an inversion of singularity. And so the singularity has basically split, and it's basically become two different universes entirely. We're moving from one universe to another, but there are octave universes in the middle, right? So this is why if you're looking into something like the Mandela effect, where you're seeing all these different forms of memories that have taken place through TV shows, movies, people, Nelson Mandela, people who thought died in the 80s, died in 2009, I believe it was. And again, they're seeing these transformations of different timelines. Some of this is artificial and some of this is natural. It's basically that there are actual technologies that exist. CERN is notorious for that, for being able to try and transport us into another timeline that it favors them. That was primarily a part of an old agenda, is let's get ourselves into a timeline where the aspect of a cabal can rule, where there can actually be that. But because the vibration of the collective consciousness is not on that level, they couldn't do it, right? You have to get everybody completely saturated in fear. I mean, 90% of the population at least, to get them in so much fear and feeling that the world's about to end. Now you can shift them into another timeline, because that's part of a minority agreement. But if you're basically attempting to shift people to another timeline, to another dimension, and they're not in that alignment, it won't work, right? So there will basically be side effects. And those side effects can be these particular types of engrams of memory that we're noticing in different dimensions that are not compatible here, right? And again, a lot of people say, oh, you guys are just crazy. I don't know what they're talking about. Well, basically, when those people are saying that, they're indigenous to this timeline. They're indigenous to this dimension. To their perspective, they've never had any particular memory shifts in that way. But basically, it's been a lot of clustering and declustering of a lot of dimensionality. And this is basically showing us that we're moving into fourth density, that we're moving into another dimension, because now we're starting to see how we're going sideways in space and time. And what that is that's having direct awareness of other realities that exist, and your own memory is the proof of that. Right? So that's primarily what's happening. So it's an inversion of singularity. And again, through synchronicity, where we've looked into a lot of these dimensional jumps, or attempted dimensional jumps, through artificial and natural means.
Yeah, I had my first Mandela effect. It was Thanksgiving Day 2014. And I was beside myself. I couldn't believe it. Ian's dad came over and I said, do you know what the Mandela effect is? And I tried to, it was like the Bernstein Bears or something. But for me, I remember the Mandela effect I experienced that day, and then several, but I also remembering like it switched back. So I have both of the original Mandela effect, and then I experienced it switch again back to the original. So I've experienced but all the ways, the different ways. So it's very interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, it's even that even if you look at the globe right now, you'll notice that there are changes, just from what I remember. One thing was that Greenland felt a lot bigger to me than it did. There was even there was even other countries in that sense that may have changed. It almost feels like the Caribbean almost feels much more closer to the North American state, or the North American continent, than I did, even with Russia and Alaska almost touching in that way, basically being 50 miles apart. From that world that I came from, they were never that close, right? So there's just certain things that I noticed, and so this is weird. I just, I've looked at these maps 1,000 times, and I swear I've never, seen that. Like I said, I'm no geology expert, but I just know I used to have like a picture of the world right on my desk, and looking into the way that everything was shaped out. And then I'd look at those almost exact same copies of those maps. Some of it was Google Maps, and some of it was just the printed out versions, and they changed. I'm like, oh my God, this is weird, right? So that's just noticing that there have been certain things changing. Then you tell us.
I collect globes, and I've always have, and Tevin can tell you, and Cuba is moved. Oh, that's moved. You're not wrong.
Yeah. I went to Turks and Caicos just a little over a year ago, and so I was very aware of how the Caribbean looked. And it was very much a little bit more over here, and now it's like right over here, right? So
now,
yeah. So that's showing again we've shifted to a whole new Earth with some different laws applied.
Right. So on New Year's Day, a couple days ago, I was driving. It was 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm in my husband's truck, and it's still dark out, and I hear this high-pitched humming, and I'm looking on the dashboard. Oh my gosh, is something happening with the truck? And then it faded away, and then it started again, and it got really, really high, and I could feel my body. Like, it felt really weird, and then all of a sudden there was this pop, and I looked down at the time, and it says 555, and I could feel the shift. I literally felt the shift. And so I think because as we go down this journey, we become more aware, we become more, we clear out all the muck, we get rid of all the filters, all the trauma, all the experiences, and we really get in our body, and you can really experience these things and understand it and grasp it and use it. It really helps with your expansion. I mean, my life is so magical now that I'm in this space where I can really, this is the way life is supposed to be.
That's the true world, right?
Right.
And that's primarily how you know something is shifting. Is like, that's happened to me several times as well. I'll just come into my house, and I just get this feeling, and all of a sudden I turn to my stove, and it says 1111 or 222 in that sense. And that's primarily part of the technology that we have on this planet. So this whole planet is buffered with all kinds of smokes and mirrors. There's so much to this world that we're not seeing. There's different dimensional realities. There's the Fey realms. There's the elemental realms. There's the inner earth realms as well too. It's all these different dimensions that are primarily converging. It's like looking at these clipping grids. These grids are just clipping together and harmonizing themselves together. And we just notice these little shifts. It's almost like a quote unquote glitch in the matrix, right? We basically look at this synchronicity, 11:11 on the clock, 2:22 on the clock. People will see it in their own personal lives about how they've shifted. They look at their watch, oh, it's a 2:22, right? So all of these are numerological programs, because this whole earth is just artificially under a state of great maintenance, in that sense, administration in that way. It's very, very technological. There's a lot of prisms that shine together on this planet, showing us that this is what we believe the earth is, when in fact it's nothing like that. When the veil drops, the earth is going to look a lot more dimensionally different than what we may realize.
Is that going to be a real, is that metaphoric, or is that a real?
No, that's literal. It's very literal. But not everybody's going to experience that, right? Because basically people who are still very much contained in the practicums of physical reality, in that sense, will still choose to be in a reality where all those grids are snapped together to give the idea of a linear direction, right? Those are basically what I refer to as the people that remain in third density. And those that go to fourth will basically start to see, again, this kind of sideways in time and space.
My husband hopes that I have 6 boobs.
Well, I wouldn't put too much faith in that. But maybe in the dream states, that's for sure. Yeah. It's not going to be in the idea of feeling that you're just going to wake up a blue person, a person with blue skin, or anything like that. It's not about that. It's primarily just the idea that you're being more aware of different grids. You're being aware of different dimensions that are kind of like a slight overlay to yourself. It's kind of like it's kind of like a double exposure, a double focus in that way, and saying, oh, there's like one reality here and there's one reality here. So it's primarily just almost like getting the impression. It's like how we close our eyes and sometimes get visions, right? And those visions can basically overlay into our physical reality, and they're telling us something in that particular way, or we can actually shift into another reality really quickly to get us an impression about what's coming and then shift back, right? So again, it's basically what the fourth density represents, is that it's going sideways in time.
Okay. All right. Well, do you have any questions about that, Tevin?
No, we're good.
Okay. Do we have any, I know it's a lot. Do we have any questions?
Lisa had a question. I'll let you decipher because I'm not super privy to the, okay. Please provide guidance for how to observe the chaos of the storm that is starting in 2018 without feeding that energy or drawing any of it to us.
Well, the question basically becomes the answer. Just observe it, right? Don't be involved with it in that way. It's just basically the whole idea is you're only going to get involved if you feel that this means something to you. If this is something important to you, you're going to automatically get involved. It's basically saying, oh, just take all this stuff away. I don't want to look at it. I'm going to put a blindfold over my eyes. Well, then basically you're afraid of it, right? And that's going to create a fear. Basically with a lot of the stuff that's coming in is it's important to look at it. It's not about shielding your eyes and thinking, I don't want to look at this. It's very important that you are looking at it because it's helping you to understand what your shadow is attempting to tell you, right? If you're seeing something like, again, like President Trump coming up there and saying, hey, this is what I'm doing next, blah, blah, blah. And we just get so mad at him, right? We're saying, why am I mad at this person? What's going on? Well, because he's this and he's that and he's the other thing. Well, there's definitely qualities within myself that represent that. So I'm really just getting mad at myself with him being that catalyst, right? And just say, this guy's a jerk off and he's this and that, right? I'm no Trump fan myself, right? But it's the whole idea of with anybody in that way. If you feel that this person is just driving you crazy and driving you nuts, it's because there's still something that you're holding on to that's attempting to let go, right? So to be in true observation is something you don't need to hide. It's not something that you need to pretend or not something you need to force. When you're in natural observation, you're in that level because of an authenticity, not because you're attempting to forcefully try and stay yourself in a state of observation. And again, if you do that, it's just wearing a mask, right? Be very honest with yourself. If you're going to react, if there's going to be an anger, let the anger out. Let the anger be expressed because it's showing you in that sense about what you're holding on to that's preventing you from evolving to another level of being, right? So it's very, very important that we do just look at these things. Not to say you have to turn on the TV and you have to look into all this gossip, but if it comes to you through synchronicity, through happenstance, then let it come through in that way and just be mindful about how you observe it and how mindful about how you feel about it.
Good. Yeah, that's something I've just recently, within the last couple months, was the final little touches on the observation mode. getting into full observation mode. Tevin, is there another question?
I'll kind of sum up. There were a couple questions about, I'll just sum it up. The idea of purpose, specifically in the younger generation, could your perspective on purpose and finding it and so on and so forth?
Well, purpose is a first step. I would say that's the most important thing to look at, is that purpose will be something where you feel you can put your energies towards and has a certain level of focus. But as you start to play with purpose a lot more, you'll start to realize it's not so important anymore, right? You don't really come to this planet for purpose. You don't come to this life for purpose. Purpose is something that is self-applied. And really, it's about coming into our nature. It's being able to understand that when you are part of nature, you are everyone and you are everything. So you can say, oh, I'm going to spend my entire life being a doctor. Okay, that's your choice. That's what you would consider to be purpose. But you also have other availabilities to you. It's just the realization of the mind of knowing that when you become nature, everything's available to you. So it's like looking at a forest and saying, oh, I like this shrub. I'm just going to be this shrub for the rest of my life. Okay, that's great. You can go ahead and do that. But there's also an entire forest around you. You can be the trees. You can be the grass. You can be the animals. You can be the sky. You can be the water, right? You can be everything. So primarily purpose is just helping to create a certain state of focus within yourself. And you may play with quite a few purposes in that way. And that's great, because that's kind of like your happy box. You're going inside purpose and say, yeah, I love being a doctor. I love being a musician. I love being a teacher, etc. And I love playing with this. Great. Now what? Now when you step outside that box, how do you feel? Oh, I don't want to go back to that life. I just want to play with my purpose. Well, then that's basically showing that you're isolating yourself simply because of one particular degree of purpose. So why not come into nature? Why not open the door to that box and let all that stream of love that you enjoy doing touch every fractal of the entire reality itself? So don't just see yourself as one thing. See yourself as many things and play with those many things in that way, because you can be as many things as you want. And it really just doesn't even mean anything, right? This is basically where it gets into more advanced teachings, where you look at everything and saying it's meaningless, right? If I'm looking into me being a doctor, okay, that's great. It's fun, but it has no stick to me. It's not sticking to me. It's not clasping to me in that particular way. It's like me, myself, being this spiritual teacher in that way. That's fun, but I could drop it at the dime of a hat, at the dime of a drop of a dime, right? I can drop it at the greatest moment that I feel it's no longer important to me. So primarily the whole idea is that we're having fun with things, but we're not attaching them. They're not a possession. My body is not an attachment. My work is not an attachment. I love doing all this stuff. I love playing with the body. I love playing with the work, but it's something that I can let go of at the drop of a hat, right? And that's when you know you're coming into nature, because basically a tree is not going to solve itself when it realizes it's being cut down. It's not going to hold up a sign and saying, please don't cut me down. Certainly it has feelings in that particular way, but it's always about stillness. It's always saying that it's not going to resist from being chopped down in that particular way. That's part of how nature works, is that nature will never object to being destroyed in that way, because it's being a messenger showing to others, this is what you're doing. And then other humans will see that and say, let's stop doing that. Look at what we're doing to nature, right? But nature will always just be in that state of stillness. It's kind of like looking again at the ancient yogis and the ancient masters. You could basically see them and they're just so full of bliss that you could light them on fire and they'll still smile at you, right? That's how deep they are into this state where it's just not about life. It's not about purpose. They're not connected to the body in a feeling of an attachment. They're the universe. They're everyone and they're everything. And there's no matter what you could do to them, they will always just be in that state of bliss. And that state of bliss comes from the idea of complete and total disengagement of everything that we would understand as purpose on this planet. So you play with purpose until you realize that purpose is no longer important. But it's not some quote-unquote divine destiny that the stars have given you. It's a destiny you've given yourself.
Yeah, I think that one of the teachings, I was so big on purpose early on, and I kept going and going and going, and I realized that it actually put me into another box.
Yep.
Purpose put me into another box.
Yep.
Okay, we just have a couple more questions, Brad, if you would hang around just a couple more minutes.
Yeah, about in 5 minutes. I got.
Okay, wrap up in 5, Tevin. Somebody asked, do hallucinogenics, how they diminish your life force? Does weed diminish your life force in the same way?
At a much more lesser level, I would say, because it's a very more of a lesser hallucinogenic in that particular way. But yeah, it primarily does, simply because, like I stated, is that we have a natural attuned state of being, right? When we start using these psychedelics that basically have all these neurochemicals within them, it basically boosts up processes within the body. And because your body is not used to having those natural processes on a natural level, it steps up all of these particular processes, and that's what creates the aspect of much more life force needed to boost yourself up into that perceptual range, right? So even like if you're looking into Taoism or Buddhism in that sense, they usually, quote unquote, kind of discourage the idea of using any particular forms of psychedelics because of what it does to your chi, what it does to your life force in that way. And like I said, if you do have to feel that you do it in moderation, right? Do it in something that you feel particularly called for, because it's very unlikely that your guidance is going to say, okay, you did it today, do it again tomorrow, right? Or do it the next day and do it the next day after that, in that sense, right? You probably wouldn't be alive for very long after that. It's a very, very intense potent mix. Again, a lot of this substance is very intense neurochemicals. And when you're putting a lot of that into your body has to compensate for the perceptual range that it needs to move itself into through alignments. So this is exactly what gulps up a lot of your prenatal chi. And so this is why it's important that if you do it, please do it. Make sure you're doing it in moderation, but it's your life. You have to decide exactly what you feel you want to do.
Right. Are there more questions, Tevin?
No, yeah, I mean, that's it. I think we got it.
Okay. All right, so Brad, what are you, I know you just released your channeling stuff. You're getting ready to move in January. You're going to do a whole tour of the upper Northwest, right?
Pacific Northwest. Yeah.
Yeah, tell us what you got going on and any specials or, whatever.
Yeah, well, there's my website, newearthteachings.com. So I basically do private sessions. I do light circuitry attunements, which is an instantaneous healing system. I do what's known as spiral akashic viewing, looking into past and future lives, looking into a person's energy body, talking to their higher self in that way. I also do the new course that came up, channelingcourse.com, and that's a brand new, very deep, in-depth course relating to channeling, psychic development, channel healing. There's also going to be teachings with Adronis on there as well too, so that's available now. And there's going to be some end-of-month events that I'm going to be doing here. One is online. It's called Learning Tumo. It's learning about the Tumo technique and keeping yourself, activating your inner fire. So basically being able to step out into the cold and not be affected at all, simply because you've warmed up your inner fire, right? So there's quite a few things going on. I'm also connecting with a buddy of mine who owns Portal to Ascension. I'm doing an extraterrestrial disclosure event here in January as well too. So there's a lot of stuff. I would say just check out my website, newearthteachings.com. It'll keep you informed about everything that's happening.
Okay. All right, Brad, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Really great information.
Thank you so much for having me. We'll talk again soon, I'm sure.
All righty.
All right, you take care.
Bye-bye. Good night,
Bye.
everybody.
See you guys.